I got to see, this is a true story, when I was there, they were evaluating a deal. This was in like 2000, year 2000. And they asked me to come in the room, which they never did. I thought, this is weird, maybe I'm getting fired. But I walked in there and they said, well, I want you to sit down and listen to this presentation. I want your thoughts. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I sat down and I watched the company present, really impressive group of people, really cool product. And the entrepreneur left, they said, what do you think? I said, well, it's a great product, but can't understand how you're going to get away from copyright violations and give this thing away for free. I think we're going to get sued if we do the deal. So we decided to pass on the deal. The deal was Napster. Okay? So I met with Zuckerberg, right, is the name? So I met him and some of the people that came in with him, and throughout the time I was there, I got to meet a lot of really interesting people. Some of the investors that we worked with was a firm, it's now gone, but it was called Champion Ventures. And it was Ronnie Lott and Joe Montana and Harris Barton started a venture capital firm asking professional athletes to donate, to invest in their partnership, and then they were putting money in VC firms. And so I got a chance to meet Ronnie Lott and Joe Montana and Harris Barton, and they took us to a 49ers practice. And I got a ball signed by Jerry Rice and Ronnie Lott and all that cool stuff. And so the longer we spent there, the more I met Jim Clark, who founded Netscape and Healtheon. So lots and lots of really high-profile people in the Valley I got a chance to meet. So if the venture capitalists decide as a partnership they're going to do a deal, then they have to negotiate what's called a term sheet. And on the term sheet, and I drafted a lot of these, you determine how much cash you're going to give to the startup company and how much ownership they're going to give you in the form of stock for the money that you're providing them. Okay? Now obviously, the stronger the idea you have, the less ownership you have to give up. If it's a relatively early idea, it's got some weaknesses and a lot of risk, then it would not be uncommon for the venture capitalists to take 40-45% of your company right away. And you as an entrepreneur have a choice. You either take the venture money and let them come in as owners of your company. You still will have, at least in the early parts, primary control. Or you try to run it yourself and bootstrap it. And a lot of times you just don't have enough cash, and the banks won't loan you money because you're too risky. And so the venture capitalists are the only source. They give you the cash. You have lots of opportunities to, for them to help you to grow. So a lot of the VCs will help make introductions for you. So if one of your potential customers is Apple, and one of the venture capitalists used to work at Apple, then you have a much better chance of getting your company some new customers, like big customers like Apple, because of the relationship the venture capitalist has with that particular company. So if you get funded, the venture capitalist buys a stock. They buy private stock when it's a private company, preferred stock, I should say. And then from there, about 9 out of 10 companies will completely fail. 9 out of 10. So the early stage venture capitalists know that, and if you don't, they'll tell you. And only about 1 out of 10 will be successful. What separates the Sequoias and Benchmarks, the top tier venture capital firms, from everyone else is the magnitude of the winners. Okay? So in this industry, the rich get richer. So if you're an entrepreneur and you come into Sequoia and we sit down and talk and you've got a great idea and you're trying to interview me to see if I'm going to invest in you, and I work for Sequoia, and I'm Don Valentine and I say, well, I've done eBay, Yahoo, Google, right, and start listing this, you are much more inclined to go with me because I have a track record of absolute success. So in this industry, it's unfortunate, but the big companies been around for a long time with the best track records see all the best deals. So when they have winners, they have huge winners, right? So that if you look at the percentages of winners and losers, there's not much of a difference between the big firms. The difference is for Sequoia, they're going to have Google for a winner. Some other company over here, VC firm's going to have a company you've never heard of, maybe a business-to-business acquisition, which gave them some returns, but not nearly the size of returns that Sequoia would have. So I was there in 99, 2000. I came in right when the stock market started to explode. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the returns. The average return for venture firms that were investing in 95. So you guys will go over this in your personal investing, but obviously you want to buy low and sell high, right? So in 94, 95, when a lot of these companies were getting started, the market was down here. So they were buying stock for a very low valuation. They're paying very little for it. By 99, 2000, the market's up here. So for the companies that made most of their investments in 95, 2000, they ended up doing what's roughly a 20x. So in this deal right here, if this were a venture firm that did a 20x, that means they would get $2.4 billion returned on 200 million. Did I do that right? Is it even more than that? It might be more than that. I'm not a math major. Let's see. 10x would be 2 billion, right? So it's got to be more than this. It's got to be 4.2 billion. So if you had raised a fund back in 95 and you invested it wisely, you could have turned 200 million into 4.2 billion. Now, venture capitalists are not just in it for the management fee. They want a cut of this profit. The average venture capital firm gets 20% of the profit. Okay? Now, if we look at that scenario, that means, hopefully I can do this a little bit better, that means $820 million goes to the venture capitalist or the GP, and the balance, which is, I don't know, I'm not going to do this right, is it about 3 billion? I don't know. It's got to be 3 point something. 3.4 billion, yeah. Goes to the LPs. Remember I told you there's about 10 or 12 investing professionals that share this? So that means in this scenario, the average person makes 80 million out of this. Okay? Now, the way it works is the big cheeses, the ones that have been there the longest, take bigger pieces. So it would not be uncommon for two people to take 250 million each right off the top. So I was there when all this happened. Okay, I got zero of that money, just so you know, or I wouldn't be here. I'd be giving the speech, I just wouldn't be teaching here full time, because I wouldn't need to work anymore. But they took a tremendous amount of this value out. Okay, and this wasn't, I'm not giving you examples of the firms I work for, I'm just saying the industry averages during that time were substantial. We'll never ever see that again, okay? The average return for venture capital is about a 3x. So that means that the 200 million we're turning to 6. 200 million is a return of capital and you're splitting 400 million. Even at that, you take 20% of 400 million, it's $80 million, and you're splitting it amongst 8 or 9 people. I mean, $10 million is not a bad return, right? Most of us would retire off of that. So because these people got so rich so fast, and I was around some of them, I'll tell you a couple stories. I'm getting bored of my own talk, okay? I was hanging out in my office one day, and one of the partners, a young guy, came in and said, hey, come outside with me for a minute. So when a partner tells you to go, you go. So I go outside, and he's got a brand new Ferrari parked out front. Okay, the guy was probably, well, he's probably my age now, so he's in his late 30s at that point. Okay, he's got a brand new F360 Ferrari, red, beautiful car. So we get in the car, we go for a ride in it because he wanted to have some fun. And then he ends up driving me over to the dealership in Los Gatos where he bought it, because he had left his Mercedes there, and he wanted me to drive his E55 AMG Mercedes back to his house. Now at the time I wasn't making more than 70 grand a year, maybe 80. Car's worth about 100. So I looked at him real seriously and said, you know, if I crash this car, I can't pay for it. And he looked at me and smiled and he said, what do I care? I got a Ferrari. So anyways, so there was, and that guy was the nicest guy. A year later, he picked me up for lunch and threw me the keys and said, why don't you drive? So I drove his Ferrari, which was really cool. And if you've never driven, I've never driven a car of that caliber, but it's a stick. I can drive a stick. So I started going in first gear. It gets up to about 20 miles an hour. The RPM starts going about 3,000. I go to grab this shifter. He yells, no. He grabs my hand. He said, wait, all the power in the Ferrari is around 8,000 RPMs. So I just kept doing it. It's his car. I shift. I go into second gear at about 60 miles an hour. That's when I went into second gear. I took it up to 100 because I figured, what the hell? You know, if I'm going to take it, I'll take my picture.